while other folks to answer one other question, no, I do not still do that for a living. I did not, in fact, go on to a PhD. Now I write treaties.
That's impressive work, my friend.
It's really fun. I love it. I get to spend a lot of time working with First Nations communities, trying to help build out a treaty within the legal framework that we have that is best going to meet the goals and the stories they want to tell about their community and as they move forward. It's amazing. It's wonderful work. I absolutely love what I do. It's not theology, but they are related.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of our American audience in the chat who don't understand. They said treaties and they put question marks around them.
So most of Canada, when it was initially settled by Western settlers, had developed what they called the numbered treaties. There are a couple of other smaller treaties in British Columbia, but they were actually, like, BC was quite separate. When BC joined Canada, there were no treaties, like there were not the same type of treaty in all of BC. There's a couple little spots with what are called the Douglas treaties that are much narrower in scope. So we are now negotiating tripartite treaties, and they are tripartite between the Government of Canada, the Government of BC, and the Government of the First Nation or First Nations that we are working with. I primarily work both on treaties and on non-treaty agreements. Oh, we break our treaties all the time, the number of treaties, the modern treaties less so. And these are called modern treaties. I work primarily with the Shwepum Nations, which are a large group of nations. I'm just gonna let chat pull up a map from like nativeland.ca or any of the ones.
Yeah, easy to find.
Because they're going to be able to find it much better than I'm able to describe it. And I work both with Northern Shwepum and Southern Shwepum nations currently. I've also worked in the Northern Island and up in Tsimshian territory in the past. And the goal is actually, we are building the lovely challenge of like describe your job badly. Mine is I write the future, because this is what we are going to be doing moving forward. And it's not just the nations that I work with, but as residents of BC, as residents of Canada, we are treaty people. We are just as bound by our treaties and just as privileged by our treaties in how they operate as the nations that I work with.
You're explaining your job badly is so cool.
I know, it's great.
So I just tap onto that because I really appreciate what you do. So I spend a lot of time with the Haida, which is the North Island that's very up close to the Alaska Panhandle. And they're pretty early on in the treaty negotiations. They started early, and so part of what's happened up there, you see it in the culture. So up there now they own their own logging companies rather than other outsiders owning them. They own their own fishing stuff in terms of, they have their own licenses and they have their own places where they produce the fish that they sell out. And then one of the things that's happened fairly recently up there is all the names of things have got returned back to the native names. So that's part of the benefit.
Yeah.
And then makes it really interesting for people who don't know much about it, because it increases the education. There's big signs that say why this is now this name and this is this name, and and what that all means. And so it's I've seen how it benefits that group.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
and
so it's cool.
It's really interesting working on treaties, because in Canada, treaties are constitutionally protected. The only thing in terms of law that outranks a treaty is the Constitution itself. And so we have a lot of tools available, because when the treaty comes into effect, that becomes one of the highest possible laws, and they are passed as legislation in Parliament and in the provincial parliament as well, in the provincial legislature, separately as laws. And we have then the ability to go and change a lot of other laws and adjust other laws in order to make them in compliance with what is now a higher law, and that is the treaty.
That's really cool.
And I mean, at work we jokingly call it the hammer of treaties. And I work with a lot of agreements that are not treaty, so we don't have as many tools. We don't have this legislative hammer, but we still are pushing. I don't always love the mandate that I have, which is the scope in which I am allowed to work. There are a lot of times that I personally, as someone working in the field, think that it should be broader, but I will always do the most that I can within the hand that I've been dealt, which is the scope that I have. Also with Haida, the Haida Title Act, I won't go into it, but it's amazing. But it's also made possible because there is functionally no overlapping assertions of title or assertions of land claim on Haida, because it's an island that no one else can get to easily.
Nope.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because there's the Haida Council of Nations, because I know people that are on the council. And so that's different chiefs from different parts of the island, and so they feel very empowered to be able to make decisions that affect the community.
Yeah.
Within the parameters of the Canadian system, so to speak.
Yes.
But they're able to make it for themselves, and so that's a big difference from where we were 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did I start in this field, and how did I transition from seminary? When I was in seminary, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was coming through Canada, and that is about the residential school system in Canada. The same existed, or similar existed, in the States. And the United Church, which I'm part of, was one of the churches that had residential schools. I'm very proud of the fact that apparently we were the first to offer an apology.
Yes.
Just so people have a context, I was 14 when the last residential school in Canada closed. They ended in 96. And so it continued on for a very, very long time. But the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, looking into what was happening, there's a really great link there. And I highly recommend to anyone, if you have the resources and capacity emotionally and psychologically to actually like look into it, do. It's incredible. And it is heartbreaking. But I took part in this as a representative of the United Church. When I graduated seminary and I was looking for work, Eric had just gotten a job on the island, and there were not a lot of student positions necessarily on the island. A lot of the part-time positions that previously would have become student intern positions actually went to people who were retired but found the cost of living to be high, and so were taking part-time, or they were taking a lot of the pulpit supply work, which is just you show up at a church and you preach because their celebrant, their minister isn't available that day. They're
Sick or out of town or on
usually
vacation
there's a
or-
plan ahead of time, out of town. They're on sabbatical, whatever might happen. So I was looking for other work, and I went into ended up going into government, and where I ended up in government was MIR, the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, partially on the strength of the work that I had done. And even though I started as a clerk 9, which is the kind of lowest entry level admin position that you can possibly have in the BC government, I about a year later started actually doing negotiations and participating, and that is how I got into this work. Is I went from being in seminary, having like this very deeply felt understanding of our side, the settler side of the residential school system, seeing the trauma, seeing what has happened as a result of this, and then going from there. It's still a calling, and I will always work in whatever position I am to make the world better in a way that I see that I am able, and this is a way that I am able to do so. Yeah, so that's kind of how I ended up in that from seminary. There's a through line.
Doesn't only knit, kids.
I don't only knit.
If you didn't know.
Well, I mean, you're knitting communities
I know she
together.
is. It's
Yeah.
amazing, Carrie. Good. That was
And-
super.
A lot of communities don't like treaties. They think that they are themselves a very colonial construct,
Which is fair.
which is fair. And the reason I work on so many different types of agreements and how I feel about that, and I'm asked, like, how do you feel about doing this work when, we think that this is really colonial? And the answer is, I don't. I will work with whatever tools the nations that I'm working with want to work with. It's their choice, not mine. and I get to hear so many of their stories. And the greatest, like, there are chills up my spine thinking about this. Like, the greatest compliment I have ever received was a chief that I was working with telling me how much they trusted me with their stories.
Wow, that's an honor.
And that's incredible. And so where we live in Victoria, which is Lekwungen land, Haishka Siam is how you would say thank you. And in the communities where I work, which are Shwepum, it's thank you everyone would be Hwaikpa, and thank you individually, like to an individual person, is Hwai. So I've also been working on languages.
Okay, well then I'll give you one I know.
Yeah.
Why not? So, thank you in Haida is Hawa.
Hawa?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's not a
I
lot
got a
of
long
people, so I'm
way to
just gonna
learn
go on a digression
more
about
words,
how what I do, and also how amazing the people that I work with are, because they're all also very incredibly committed to the work and to trying to do it as best as we can. Yeah.
Heartwarming, big
Yeah.
heartwarming.
Thanks, Emily. That was a lot of information.
I get asked every single year.
But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of thank yous in chat as well. If
Yeah.
you hadn't noticed already.
At least in the past, 3 years, the time I've been on Dawn Guard, you haven't done it on our shift.
I've never actually gone into like the full what do I do,
I was gonna say you haven't done a full end-to-end explanation. That's very cool.
but I've been asked every single year that I've been working for Burr, I have been asked. Including at one point Mikey being like, yeah, we're all content creators, and I'm like, I'm not. What do you do? Oh, I write treaties.
Hello.
The bus? Hey, I'll tell you later. I never did.
Well, I'm really glad you told that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of these things that is so important that we talk about and, celebrate that we're trying to make it a better place,
Yeah.
right? And that's really what it's all about. And art, just so that you understand the residential schools without going into the dark part of it, but how we celebrate it in British Columbia, it's now actually a holiday. We get the day off, and everybody wears a bright orange t-shirt that says, "Every child matters." And so, for me, that's so much how fits into how my brain operates. I love my Every Child Matters t-shirts.
I do not have an official Every Child Matters t-shirt, and part of that is because I'm just very conscientious of where some of them come from, actually, because like I know the sister of one of the artists, and they just kind of get taken the art and then sold, and not necessarily the funds going where I want it to. But I did get from him and his family a thing that I could put on the side of an orange t-shirt that I already have, which is a D&D cleric.
Excellent.
Appropriate.
Yeah.
I purchase from the
Yeah.
First Nations.
Yeah.
But it's a nice logo,
And
and it's lovely, and it speaks depth and warmth, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's what we believe here, guys. Really, that globally. The chat and all of us in here, right? This for the children
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
because every child matters, right? Even if they're sick leave for a time or they're whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I once made the worst joke ever about Civilization, the video game. And so somebody had pointed out that in Canada, the cultural object was a hockey arena. And somebody said, oh, come on, we must have at some point in our history had a better way or had a different way of spreading our culture. And I'm just like, residential schools? I'm not saying we did it well. It's like no,
It wasn't a good thing, but
it wasn't a good thing, but yeah, we definitely did that.
I worked with those kids, Ellie.
So do I.
No, but because I've
Okay.
been working with troubled youth since the 80s.
Yeah.
I was working with them once they were coming out of those places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of work. There's a lot left to do. And we have a lot of people who are very committed to doing it. there's your very positive end to that conversation.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Very positive.